Scrapbooks represent a fun way to document your experiences, and they can provide us with a pleasant look into the past. To ensure your scrapbooks last, however, it's critical to recognize current standards and practices for scrapbook preservation. Greetings, I'm Samuel Alexander, Charlotte County Libraries and Histories Librarian Archivist, and in this presentation, I'll be going over what materials and techniques you should use when scrapbooking to make a long-lasting scrapbook. I'll also offer a brief overview of how to handle and store scrapbooks both new and old. As a hobby, scrapbooking may seem simple. You take some newspaper clippings and affix them onto a sheet of paper. Is there a need to think further? That's just one form of scrapbooking, however, and scrapbooking as a hobby can be traced back over 500 years to the compiled books of the English Renaissance, with scrapbooks as we recognize them coming into popularity in the 19th century. With such a lengthy history, numerous developments and innovations have impacted scrapbooking, both for better and worse. For example, in 1870, groundwood pulp began experiencing widespread use in papermaking. Although this led to paper becoming more accessible, it also introduced lignin to paper and increased its acidity. This in turn causes paper to become weak and brittle, alongside darkening when exposed to light. This is an example of inherent vice, where materials deteriorate due to the instability of their substances. Inherent vice is one of the most daunting challenges in preserving scrapbooks. Other examples of inherent vice in scrapbooks include red rot, where leather breaks down into red powder, and leather corroding metal. To mitigate inherent vice in scrapbooks, it's crucial to consider the materials used for the different scrapbook components. There are 4 components to a scrapbook. The first is binding, which is what keeps the scrapbook together, and it can be sewn, laced, or post. Next is supports, which comprise the pages, and it isn't limited to paper pages. Plastic sleeves and overlays would also count as supports. Then you have attachments, which secure materials to the supports. Then lastly, you have the ephemera, which represents the material on display in the scrapbook. Although I said there's primarily 3 forms for binding scrapbooks, there are some additional ones which can be lumped in with them. For sewn, you can lump it together with traditional book binding, and for post, you can lump it together with 3-ringed binding. Of sewn, laced, and post, it's best to implement post. This is because sewn doesn't allow for expansion, and the glue used in it may be acidic. Lace tends to be weaker than post, while post is strong and allows for expansion. 3-ring binding has most of the benefits of post binding, but it can't be replaced and can suffer from misalignment, so I would go with post over 3-ring binding. Lastly, to help preserve scrapbooks, use binding structures with spacers or stubs. As stated before, supports tend to be paper or plastic. When using paper pages as supports, keep the following in mind. Use acid-free and lignin-free paper. Some paper may be touted as acid-free, but this only means the paper was produced with a neutral pH. It may still be possible for the paper to develop acid over time, so it's better to prioritize using lignin-free paper than acid-free paper, although lignin-free paper will most likely be acid-free as well. When using plastic as support, you'll want to avoid PVC plastic and instead use polyethylene or polypropylene plastic. Lastly, avoid self-adhesive or magnetic pages as they're gimmicks that cause more problems than help they provide, so not really worth it. There are a variety of attachments you can use for scrapbooking. When it comes to glue, use wheat starch paste, PVA, or UHU stick glue sticks to avoid rubber cement, other solvent-based adhesives, and adhesive dots, which are a problematic gimmick like magnetic pages. For tape, use water-moistenable gummed linen tape and avoid pressure-sensitive tape, i.e. Scotch tape and masking tape. For pins, paper clips, and staples, avoid metal attachments and keep in mind the pressure these kind of attachments may place on materials and supports. Lastly, non-adhesive attachment methods like acid-free and lignin-free paper photo corners or polyethylene photo corners are good. With ephemera, various materials warrant different considerations. With materials like photographs and newspaper clippings, you'll want to copy them and then use the duplicates in the scrapbook while keeping the originals in a safe location. This prevents the original photographs from being damaged and prevents newspaper clippings from damaging other materials through spreading their acidity. Ephemera, like pressed flowers and locks of hair, can't exactly be scanned and copied like photographs and newspaper clippings. And these acidic materials add weight that place stress on the supports. Consequently, it's a good idea to use either interleaving or encapsulation to minimize damages. Interleaving with either unbuffered or buffered paper dampers the spread of acid, although buffered paper will serve this role much better. Encapsulation would involve placing the ephemera in a paper envelope, mylar or Melinex film, or using polyethylene sleeves. It should be noted that interleaving and encapsulation will add to the weight of the scrapbook, so it's important to keep that in mind when utilizing them. Handling and storage of scrapbooks is just as important as using proper components. For handling, you'll want to keep your hands and the reading area clean with no food or drink nearby. Don't force the book to lie open completely flat when you're working on it or reading it, and don't hold the book open in a way that the leaves on both sides lie without much of a curve or a wave. Lastly, when turning pages, support the entire leaf instead of only the tip. For storage, you'll want to store scrapbooks flat, ideally in a preservation quality, well-fitting box to keep out light, dust, and pests. For a storage space, you'll want areas that are room temperature or below, relatively dry, clean, and stable. So you'll want to avoid radiators and vents, and areas prone to leaks, such as ceiling storage and basements. By following the standards provided in this presentation, you'll be able to create scrapbooks that will last for future generations to enjoy. This concludes our program. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and tell your friends.